My organization, Nonprofit Finance Fund, has been making loans to nonprofit organizations across the country for 40 years. Our goal is to support organizations and communities and very much focused on supporting communities to take agency in realizing your own community's aspirations. Our view is that too often people who control either grant money or loan capital are often outsiders to communities where the work is happening. So much is around trust. I think there's a misunderstanding that money is scarce. There's more money than we need in this country to meet all our community's aspirations and drive justice and equity. What there isn't are those bridges between where the money is and where it needs to be. And the big reason that doesn't exist is because of the breakdowns of trust between us. And I think often what we at Nonprofit Finance Fund and many other people who are community finance organizations like us, I think it's a dirty little secret that we actually, money's not the scarcity. The scarcity is that connection to, great projects led by people with deep trust, accountability, and responsiveness in the communities they serve, who can put that money to work productively. And so I think for those of you listening to this who come from church communities, lead church communities, really don't underestimate the power you all have, because you have the thing that is most precious, and that is the ability to understand what that community's aspirations are, and the trust within the communities to help realize those aspirations. We can bring the money, and the money is relatively easy to do. Now, that said, of course, there are barriers historically to working with churches. I think there is just a fundamental disconnect. The two communities, the investor world and the church world, don't necessarily know each other. There's a lot of mutual distrust. And I think especially in the Black church context, there's a very obvious reality that for literally hundreds of years in this country, finance has been a way to strip assets from the community. It has not been, in most cases, a resource that came into that community in a way that was seeking to produce mutual benefit. I think that's true everywhere in the country. It's especially true in the Southeast, where in general we find nonprofits are more weary of working with investors than in other parts of the country. So I think a lot of this has to do with building those connections and the trust that will then ultimately allow all of us to get out of this what we want to do, which is investors want to put their money to work in ways that make a difference and are profitable, and the communities need that money to fuel your own transformation. And so I've been excited since the day I met Reverend Sidney, who talked to me about this real missing piece in the imagination of impact investors, which was a recognition that there's a huge asset in communities across the country, and that asset is the Black church. And in many cases, it's a financial asset that you all have been building up that represents multiple generations of effort that is stored in many cases in that building, but in many ways is now trapped because of the business model that's no longer viable. And yet there's a powerful asset both of real sort of physical assets and of trust in the community. And if you can bring that together with people who control money in a way that is built on mutual trust, really amazing things can happen. And so we're super excited at Nonprofit Finance Fund to be working with Oikos Institute and Crossing Capital and Reverend Sidney to be supporting this work in Atlanta, and both in terms of making our own lending capital available and having our advisory team that works with thousands of nonprofits around the country every year, helping them gain the financial knowledge that they need to take power and control of their future. And again, I don't think it's anything unique to churches. We work with about 2,000 nonprofits a year. Not a single one is run by someone who loves finance. I don't think it is unique to the church community to say these are people with incredible assets, deep connection in the community, but in many cases without the financial knowledge that they need to really turn those assets into that new vision. So what really excites me about the work that ITC is doing with Oikos and Crossing Capital is a recognition that the beginning of all of this is a reimagination by the community of what is possible. As long as the community thinks of old ways and that the church is a physical building and that's what it is, as opposed to really thinking in new ways of what it can become. We work with, in the secular world, a lot of organizations that have made that leap. And I just would say it is incredibly powerful when a community can reimagine its future. And when you do that, you are going to find that even though you're not finance people, money will ultimately put a ceiling on your community's ability to reach its aspirations if you don't know how to navigate it well and access the kinds of capital you need to really take that reimagination and make it manifest in the world.